Hey guys, tonight we're doing something a little uncomfortable. You're not in a battlefield, you're not a chimney sweep, and you're definitely not starving on the streets. No, you're something somehow worse, a 19th century dentist. Imagine it. You're standing in a dim, musty room that smells like sweat, tobacco, and something vaguely like spoiled milk. You're holding a pair of pliers you bought at a hardware stall. There's no license on the wall, no certificate, just a wooden sign that says, "Teeth pulled, no screaming discount." And the man in the chair, he reeks of rot, fear, and boiled onions. He hasn't brushed in, well, ever. His mouth is an ecosystem. You're sweating already, and not just because you're wearing 3 layers of wool. You probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know where you're listening from and what time it is where you are. I read every single one. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge through a world where anyone with steady hands and a tolerance for screaming could become a dentist. There's no dental school, no degrees, no regulations. If you've got the stomach for blood and the guts to yank a molar, congratulations, you're hired. Most people in the 1800s didn't really choose dentistry. It was more of a fallback career. You're the town blacksmith? Great. Now you're also the town tooth yanker. You're a barber with a strong arm and a dull razor? Perfect. You're promoted. Grab that jaw and start pulling. People didn't really differentiate between medical professions back then. You could be a physician, surgeon, apothecary, an occasional bone setter, all in one charming package. Teeth were just another body part to handle in your all-purpose butchery toolkit. But dentistry, that was the bottom of the barrel. You weren't saving lives, you were ending pain, and often by causing more. No one thanked you. They just paid, groaned, and tried not to punch you in the face when the pliers slipped. You don't get gloves, you don't get masks. There's no such thing as sterile. Your fingers go straight into someone's mouth after petting your dog, or eating a meat pie with your bare hands. And believe me, there are bits under your nails. Historians still argue whether early dentists were respected craftsmen or seen more like necessary evils, slightly above gravediggers, slightly below butchers. Either way, no one invited you to dinner. And the smell, good lord, the smell. You're dealing with mouths that have never known toothpaste, floss, or mouthwash. People ate whatever they could afford, and sugar was quickly becoming popular among the wealthy. The result? Cavities, gum disease, and teeth blackened into charcoal stubs. If you think modern bad breath is unpleasant, try standing nose to nose with someone who thinks brushing their teeth with ashes or crushed brick is modern hygiene. That's right, ashes, sometimes mixed with honey, or pig fat, or urine. To make things worse, dental cleanings weren't really a thing yet. Most patients only saw you when they were in agony. By then, the tooth was usually too far gone to save, so your job? Rip it out. Fast, if you were good. Brutally, if you weren't. Of course, you don't actually know what you're doing. You're learning on the job, one tooth at a time. You might have seen a few procedures, maybe practiced on a cadaver, if you were lucky. If not, your first patient was your training. And still, people came to you, because they had nowhere else to go. Because as bad as you were, the pain was worse. You're 2 minutes into your day and already drenched in someone else's sweat. The man in the chair is gripping the armrests like they're lifeboats, his jaw clenched so tightly it's a miracle you can wedge your fingers in. But you have to, because this molar isn't coming out on its own. There's no anesthesia, none. You might offer a slug of whiskey or a bite on a leather strap, but that's about it. The numbing agents we take for granted today, they don't exist yet. Or if they do, they're either too experimental, too rare, or too dangerous. Chloroform is still whispered about in medical circles. Ether is being tested, but mostly in hospitals, not in dingy backroom dental shops like yours. So when someone's tooth starts to rot from the inside out, and the pain reaches down into their neck and up into their eyeball, they come to you, and they beg you to end it, and you do, with pliers. You wedge the forceps around the crumbling enamel, brace your foot against the wooden floor, and pull like you're trying to uproot a tree stump. The tooth resists. It's anchored in by inflamed gums and angry bone. The patient screams, he kicks. Sometimes he passes out. Sometimes he throws up on your boots. If the tooth breaks off mid-pull, which it often does, you're in for the round 2 or 3 or 4. You dig around for the shards with metal hooks that aren't remotely shaped for precision. You're not a surgeon, you're just desperate. Some dentists try to soften the pain with hot coals or cauterizing irons. Yes, they burn the nerves, not to fix the tooth, just to kill the agony. Temporarily. Until infection sets in, until your jaw swells, until death, in some cases. Historians still argue whether toothaches were among the leading causes of suicide in the 9th century, but diary entries and letters are full of horror stories. People went mad from dental pain. They couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. Some begged to have their teeth pulled, all of them, just for a moment of silence in their skull. And yet, you do it, over and over. You think you get used to the sound, that wet crunch as the root tears free from the gum, the way blood spatters against your sleeve. But you never really do. Every mouth is different. Every jawbone has a surprise. And some people, they fight you. Old sailors, brawny farmhands, even genteel ladies with surprising strength when they're in agony. They claw at you. They run out mid-procedure. They faint and come back swinging. And then there are the children. Their parents bring them in, sometimes kicking and crying, sometimes already resigned. Baby teeth aren't always easier. They snap just as easily, and a botched pull can mess up the adult tooth growing beneath. You try to be gentle, but you're working in a system that doesn't value gentleness. It values speed, extraction over restoration, pain tolerance over comfort. You've tried applying a cold compress, or using laudanum drops to dull the nerves, but laudanum is opium, and giving it to someone before jamming metal into their mouth is a gamble. Too much, and they stop breathing. Too little, and it doesn't work at all. So you rely on something else, your ability to ignore the screaming, to shut it out, to go somewhere else in your mind while you tug and twist and yank until the root lets go. Sometimes the patients don't scream, not because it doesn't hurt, but because they're already too tired. They've been up for 3 nights straight, delirious from the pain. They walk into your shop like ghosts, sit down, nod once, and let you go to work. And you, untrained, underpaid, and overwhelmed, do what you can, not because you want to hurt them, but because this is all you've got. A rusty chair, a bottle of gin, and a prayer. You take a moment to wipe your hands, though what's the point? The blood is already under your nails, and your apron hasn't been cleaned since ever. But there's no time to dwell. A knock at the door, another patient, and this one didn't come for you. They came for him, the guy down the street with the striped pole and the shaving kit. You've got competition. The 19th century isn't just home to amateur dentists, it's crawling with them. Traveling tooth pullers, barbers with blood-stained towels, even con men with a silver tongue and a pair of forceps. Anyone with a strong grip and a flair for theatrics can set up shop. You've seen them. The barber-surgeon types. They wear tall boots and bold smiles, and their shops double as everything. Bloodletting clinics, surgical parlors, hair-cutting stations. Need a boil lanced, a tooth yanked, or a close shave? All in one chair. It's a one-stop nightmare. And if you live in a smaller village, sometimes a traveling dentist rolls through, usually with a wagon, painted signs on the side, claiming miracles. Teeth extracted without pain, or the gentle touch of Dr. Smile. Right, sure, that wagon's full of lies, but it's flashy, and people eat it up. These guys pull teeth in market squares with children watching. They set up next to the produce stalls and toss extracted molars into a tin bucket, like it's part of a show. Sometimes they have assistants, young boys handing them pliers, wiping blood off with rags. Sometimes the doctor plays a fiddle between patients to distract the next victim. Historians still debate whether these traveling dentists were better or worse than the local ones. Some brought innovations, some brought disaster. It was a roulette spin with every appointment. You've even heard stories, wild ones, about tooth pullers with pet monkeys that dance during the extraction. Anything to pull focus from the pain. And you're trying to build a real practice. You want people to think of your name when their molars scream at night. But with showmen undercutting you and shaving beards between extractions, it's hard to earn respect, especially when patients come in asking if you play the fiddle too. The worst part, Some of these charlatans are better than you, not because they're trained, just because they've done it longer. They've learned to yank faster, bleed less, smile wider, and when they leave town with a pocket full of coins and a trail of aching jaws behind them, you're left to fix the damage. Broken teeth, infected sockets, fragments left buried deep in the gum like landmines. So you patch them up as best you can, with limited tools, a shaky hand, and no backup plan. Because you're not just a dentist, you're the cleanup crew after the circus leaves town. You think about learning more, maybe saving up for a trip to a city where the new dental manuals are being printed. But books are expensive, travel is dangerous, and you've got patients, real ones, bleeding in the next room. So you stay. You keep doing the work. Even if someone out there is pulling teeth with one hand and stirring soup with the other, you stare down at your tools, if you can call them that. A splintered handled pair of forceps, a hooked probe that looks more suited to fishing than medicine, a metal key for molar extractions that slips more often than it grips. They clatter when you set them on the table, each with its own dull clang of dread. This is your arsenal, a collection of iron nightmares. No stainless steel, no sterilization, just the harsh honesty of iron, rust, and a prayer that tetanus hasn't taken root in the hinge. Your favorite forceps are bent from overuse, not because they're effective, but because they're the only pair that fits most adult jaws. The smaller ones, for incisors and children, have gone missing, probably stolen or traded for meat at some point. You can't remember. The tooth key is the real menace. It's a clumsy T-shaped device you wedge into the patient's mouth, crank it around the tooth, and then twist, fast. If you're lucky, the molar comes out whole. If not, you might break the crown and leave the roots behind. Worse yet, you might snap part of the jaw. And guess what? No x-rays to check where the roots lie. You're working by feel, by instinct, by blind optimism. Historians still argue whether the key or the forceps caused more long-term damage. But either way, you learn to keep a rag handy, not to clean the tools, but to wipe the sweat off your palms before a particularly bad pull. You don't have a drill, not really. There are some foot-powered contraptions emerging in the cities, a sort of dental spinning wheel that grinds into enamel at a snail's pace. But they're rare, expensive, and terrifying. Instead, you use files, long, gritty metal sticks that you rub back and forth like you're sharpening a knife. You try to open the cavity before stuffing it with something less awful, if you even attempt a filling at all. What do you fill it with? Good question. There's gold, sure, but that's for the elite, the wealthy. And even then, the process is brutal, pounding thin gold foil into the tooth with a mallet. You don't have a mallet, you have a butter knife and a lot of hope. For everyone else, you mix up whatever's lying around. Melted lead, mercury amalgam, even powdered glass. Toxic? Probably. But you're not a chemist. You're a guy trying to plug a hole before rot spreads to the rest of the jaw. And the pain? Oh, the pain. You're working inches from your patient's face as they whimper, gag, or moan through a mouthful of metal shavings. Some try to stay brave, but when the smoke starts rising from the friction, yes, actual smoke, they panic. You try to joke, lighten the mood. Smells like roast beef, you say once. The patient doesn't laugh, he faints. Everything about your setup screams danger. The wooden chair creaks ominously. The headrest is just a folded towel nailed to the backrest. There's a basin beside the chair for spit and blood, but it overflows daily. You stopped cleaning it properly weeks ago, maybe months, and still they come. Because the tools may be crude, the pain unbearable. But the alternative is worse. An untreated tooth can lead to abscesses, to infections, to death. You've seen it happen. Jaw swelling so severe the person couldn't breathe. Fevers that lasted days, and then silence. One of your neighbors lost his wife that way. A small cavity turned into something monstrous, and she, too terrified of your tools, never came. She died in bed, clutching her jaw. So you keep working, sharpening, twisting, cleaning with vodka or vinegar if you're feeling fancy. Because these tools may be the stuff of nightmares, but for now they're all that stand between pain and oblivion. And sometimes you wonder which is worse. You're mixing up a new paste. Again. There's a line outside your door, and the last filling you packed crumbled like soggy bread. So you're back at the workbench, swirling mercury with silver shavings in a dented tin cup. No gloves, no ventilation, just bare hands and a pounding headache you've started calling Tuesday. Because today, you're poisoning people. Gently, of course. You're one of the many 19th century dentists experimenting with the miracle of amalgam fillings, a blend of mercury, silver, tin, and copper. It's cheap, it's easy to mold, and it hardens like cement inside a tooth. Perfect, right? Except for the part where mercury is, well, mercury. You don't know that yet, or maybe you've heard whispers, a strange twitch in your fingers, a metallic taste in your mouth, a colleague who started forgetting his own name. But nobody's connecting the dots, not officially. Historians still argue whether early dentists truly understood the dangers of mercury. Some claim they were warned by chemists, others say greed and desperation outweighed caution. After all, people just wanted the pain to stop. They weren't asking for long-term studies, and mercury isn't the only trick up your sleeve. If a patient has a rotten nerve, you might kill it with arsenic paste. Yes, arsenic. It burns the pulp and numbs the pain. In theory. If you use too much, the poison leaks into the jaw, causes necrosis, whole sections of the face collapse, but at least the tooth doesn't hurt anymore. Small victories. Then there's the toothpaste, or what passes for it. People still brush with soot, crushed eggshells, or chalk mixed with soap. But the latest trend? Lead-based powders. They polish the enamel to a bright white, and they taste oddly sweet. Sweet enough that some people eat them. Not smart, but neither is brushing your teeth with sand, and people do that too. You recommend powdered coral to the rich. It's exotic, pink, and completely ineffective, but it feels fancy, and the upper class loves a good placebo. For mouthwash, try burnt alum, vinegar, or even straight whiskey. Not for germs, just for vibes. The concept of sterilization hasn't caught on yet. You're still rinsing instruments in the same basin you clean your hands in. If you clean them at all. Sometimes you get creative. You've tried stuffing open cavities with cloves, garlic paste, or pine resin. You've heard tales of dentists in Germany using hot wax. One man even swore by mashed onion. Did it work? No idea, but it smelled so bad no one got close enough to find out. Patients occasionally bring their own remedies, homemade salves, folk potions. One woman insisted you mix honey with powdered frog bones. You did. She said it worked. She never came back. You're still not sure if that's a good sign. The worst is when the cure becomes the cause. You once treated a man who'd brushed his aching molar with turpentine and ash. His gums were black. His breath could kill a fly. You pulled the tooth. It shattered in 4 pieces and found worms inside. Were they real? Or just larvae from some fly attracted to the decay? Historians still debate whether toothworms were ever observed or simply imagined. But in this case, you're pretty sure something moved. And what do you say to your patients? You smile. You lie. You say, "This might sting," when you mean, you'll want to scream. You call the pain temporary, and the fillings state-of-the-art. And when someone asks if mercury is safe, you nod, because what else can you say? You're not a villain. You're doing your best with what little you know, and what fewer tools you have. But every day, you mix up another batch of silver sludge. You stir in the poison, pack it tight, wipe your hands, and hope the tremor in your fingers isn't permanent. The morning's already chaotic. A child with an abscess is crying on your porch. A merchant is demanding a refund for the tooth you couldn't find. And your stomach is growling because breakfast was 2 biscuits and a spoonful of treacle. But none of that matters, because your next patient just walked in, and they're holding a chicken. Again, this is the 19th century, and dentistry is not a path to wealth. It's barely a path to lunch. You're paid in whatever people can spare. Chickens, eggs, sacks of flour, sometimes a bottle of homemade wine that smells suspiciously like vinegar. Coins are rare, especially in rural towns. Most folks save their silver for the undertaker or the blacksmith. You get the leftovers. Historians still debate whether rural dentists made enough to survive, but anecdotal records suggest most moonlighted in other trades. You pull teeth by day and mend boots by night, or you farm, or you shave beards, or you play fiddle at the tavern on Thursdays. Anything to keep the fire lit and the leeches in vinegar. Your patients assume you're rich. You wear a vest. You have your own tools, But what they don't see is that you're weeks behind on rent, and the landlord wants cash, not goats. You once accepted a hand-knitted scarf as payment for 3 extractions. It had blood on it. You didn't ask why. And then there are the trades. One man swapped you a pile of fence wood. Another offered a jug of molasses. Once, a toothless widow gave you a poem she wrote about the bravery of the gumless. You pinned it above the chair. It made people laugh until it didn't. Because there's a darker truth here. The people who can't pay often wait until their teeth are beyond saving. They show up in pain so severe they can barely speak, eyes sunken, cheeks swollen. They plead with you, not with words, but with expressions carved from desperation. And you do it, free of charge, because you can't turn them away. But that generosity doesn't fill your cupboard. It doesn't buy you new tools or books or candles for late-night cleanups, so you start rationing. 1 patient a day for free, maybe 2 on Sundays. You convince yourself that's balance. It isn't. Sometimes you overcharge the wealthy to make up for it. A silver filling? 10 times what it's worth. They don't care. They want their smile back. And they pay, not because they value your work, but because it keeps them above the poor. One man tried to haggle mid-procedure. You had already numbed his gums with ice and lodged your tool halfway around a molar when he asked if you'd accept a loaf of bread instead of coins. You told him yes, then raised the price for the next visit. And then, of course, there are the scams, fake gold fillings, powdered chalk passed off as imported dental stone. One traveling dentist swore by a tooth-regenerating elixir that was actually just mint oil and rum. He sold out in a week and disappeared with half the town's savings. You were left to deal with the angry crowd and their half-melted molars. Sometimes you wonder if you should have picked a different trade, something cleaner, something less bloody. But then you remember, nobody wants to do this. That's why the job's still open. That's why there's a line out your door. That's why a chicken is sitting on your table right now, pecking at your tools like it owns the place. You stare it down. It clucks. You sigh. Payment received. You're elbow deep in someone's mouth, trying not to gag from the stench, when you realize something odd. This man is rich. Not has a horse, this rich, but silk cravat, silver ring on every finger rich. And yet, his teeth, they look like they've been through a meat grinder. That's the great irony of the 9th century. The wealthier you are, the worse your teeth might be. You'd think it would be the opposite, that the poor, scraping by on boiled cabbage and muddy water, would have it worse. But no, sugar is a luxury, and the wealthy indulge in it constantly. Candied fruits, sugar cubes, tea with 3 lumps, every bite another step toward the dental disaster. And these people don't just eat sugar, they show it off. A decayed smile was, bizarrely, a status symbol in certain circles. Rot meant wealth. Rot meant dessert after dinner. Rot meant you didn't have to chew on dried beans like the rest of the town. Historians still argue whether this rotten elegance was widespread or just a courtly quirk, but portraits from the era often show tightly closed mouths, not in modesty, just in shame. Behind those pursed lips were black stubs, loose molars, and breath like a butcher's bin in July. And yet, these same people demand cosmetic solutions. You've had lords and ladies beg you for the finest gold fillings, not because they wanted functionality, but because they thought it looked fashionable. One man asked you to cap his teeth in silver. You warned him it would cause sensitivity. He said, "But it'll match my cane." Even the cleaning process is absurd. The rich prefer their own tooth powders, custom made by servants. Some contain crushed pearls, others use burnt bread or charcoal. The worst one? A French concoction with actual ground oyster shells and perfume. Smelled like death wearing cologne. Of course, you can't just tell them their habits are killing their mouths. So you nod, scrape, rinse, and bite your tongue. Figuratively, not literally, though you once did that too, during a particularly long cleaning session when you nearly nodded off. They lie back on the chair, if you have a chair, and demand comfort. They bring lace handkerchiefs to dab at the corners of their mouths. Some won't even touch your tools unless you've wrapped them in silk first. One woman asked if you could pre-warm the forceps so the metal wouldn't feel so shocking. You told her the forceps were already warm. You didn't mention the warmth was from the last patient's blood. And then there's the aftercare. The wealthy expect miracles. No swelling, no bruising, no pain. They want to walk out with a gleaming smile, as if you were a magician instead of a man with 3 working tools and a window nailed shut with rope. When infections happen, and they always do, you're the one blamed, not their habits, not their hygiene, you. So you try to keep up, you read pamphlets, you listen to rumors from traveling dentists, you start boiling your tools more often, you grind your own powders, you experiment with clove oil, with soot, with anything that might make a molar last just a little longer. You once boiled nettles and told a duchess it was Eastern gum tonic. She sent you a thank you note 3 weeks later, saying the pain had returned, but the tea made her feel exotic. Every time a rich patient leaves your office, you clean the chair thoroughly, not out of hygiene, but out of spite. Because their coins are bright, but their mouths are crypts. And in the dark hours, you sometimes wonder, if you had their money, would you still eat sugar by the spoonful? Or would you just buy better teeth? It's late afternoon, and you're just about to close shop when a man walks in clutching a cloth bundle. He's not bleeding, he's not in pain, he's smiling, which is always a bad sign. He lays the bundle on your table. You unfold the cloth slowly, half expecting a dead rat or a jar of home-brewed tooth tonic, and find something worse. Teeth. Human teeth. Clean, white, gleaming molars and incisors, all wrapped like fine jewelry. A full set, maybe 2, and they're fresh. Too fresh. You know what this is. Tooth snatching. You stare at him. He shrugs. Battlefield leftovers, he says. And just like that, you're faced with one of the darkest little industries of the 19th century. The wealthy want real teeth in their dentures, preferably human. Wood wears down, porcelain cracks, but actual enamel? That holds up beautifully. Even if it came from someone who didn't exactly donate it. Historians still argue whether this practice was limited to war zones or if grave robbing became more common in cities. But one thing is certain, teeth were a hot commodity. Soldiers, grave diggers, and even children made side money selling teeth they found. The Napoleonic Wars, the American Civil War, these were gold mines for the denture business. Enterprising individuals would scavenge battlefields, prying teeth from the mouths of the dead. Sometimes they'd do it before the bodies were cold. They'd bring sacks of teeth to market, selling them in bulk to dentists like you. You never asked too many questions. You couldn't afford to. Because your upper-class clients want the good dentures, the kind that fit well, the kind that don't click when they speak, the kind that make them look and feel young again. And the best way to do that is to use real teeth. So you clean them, you bleach them in vinegar, you boil them in oil, you mount them on ivory bases or wire frames and tell your client it's the latest Parisian design. They smile. You smile. Everyone tries not to think about the fact that the teeth in their mouth belonged to a 22-year-old soldier who died face down in a puddle 3 weeks ago. It's not just battlefield teeth either. Graveyards are often disturbed for dental supply. Newly buried corpses are particularly prized. The fresher the teeth, the better the color. There are even whispered stories about professional resurrectionists who work on commission. Need 10 molars and a few canines? They'll get them by dawn. You once overheard a man in the pub joke about knocking out a drunk friend's teeth while he slept. Didn't even wake up till I hit the second molar, he bragged. You left early that night. There's a strange silence around this trade. Everyone knows it happens, but no one says it aloud. Your patients don't ask where the teeth came from. You don't tell them. You simply polish, fit, and fasten, and hope the dead don't mind. But you mind. A little more each time. Because you're not just a dentist anymore. You're part of a quiet black market, a system of supply and demand built on death. And every time you place a perfect molar into a widow's gum line, you wonder, whose smile did I just borrow? Still, you keep going, because someone will buy them if you don't. Because the man with the bundle is already halfway down the road, whistling. And because next week, you'll probably need a few molars yourself. You wake up to the sound of rattling glass. It's not an earthquake. It's your jars. The ones you use to store old fillings, powdered plaster, maybe a few extra teeth you haven't found a use for yet. They're shaking because the neighborhood kids are already out selling something loud, sticky, and catastrophic for your entire profession. Sugar. Sweet, cheap, fashionable sugar. The 19th century is in the middle of a full-blown sugar explosion. With the rise of European colonial trade and industrial processing, sugar has gone from rare delicacy to daily addiction. It's in everything: tea, biscuits, jam, pies, syrups, even medicine. And you're drowning in it. Sugar has become the ultimate status symbol. The wealthier your patients, the more sugar they consume. Imported bonbons, Turkish delight, marzipan, even sugar sandwiches, yes, bread and butter sprinkled with sugar, are a thing. If it sparkles, they eat it. If it rots their teeth, they just come see you. But here's the twist. It's not just the rich anymore. Industrialization is making sugar dirt cheap. Working class families can now afford sweets. Children are chewing on boiled candies and sticky toffee, not realizing they're sealing their dental fate. Adults are swigging syrupy tonics and sugary health drinks. You once had a miner walk in with 12 visible cavities and a half-eaten licorice rope hanging from his lip. Historians still debate whether the dental decay spike was caused more by sugar or by the simultaneous drop in traditional diets. Either way, your work has quadrupled, and so has your frustration. You've seen toddlers with blackened teeth, teenagers with molars so soft you can dent them with your thumb, mothers begging for you to do something about their child's pain, only to bribe the kid with a peppermint stick for sitting still. Sugar isn't just causing decay, it's feeding infection. A small cavity becomes a festering hole in a matter of weeks. Gum disease spreads faster, abscesses grow, and you can only keep up by the pulling faster. You've tried warning people. You've said, maybe cut back on the sweets. They laugh. One woman said, better to die with sweet breath than none at all. You told her death breath wasn't sweet. She didn't return. You try to adapt. You experiment with sugar-neutralizing powders, mostly chalk and salt. You read about foreign practices like chewing on neem twigs or using charcoal as a scrub. You recommend rinsing with vinegar. No one listens. A traveling dentist once told you to coat teeth with tar to seal out sugar. You tried it. It smelled awful. The tar hardened and cracked. One patient bit into a biscuit and lost 4 teeth. And still the sugar flows. A confectioner moves in next door. Business is booming. Children line up for barley sugar twists, molasses chews, and something called tooth breakers. You try not to take it personally. You offer cleanings for half price. They choose caramel. You once saw a woman with no teeth, no gums to speak of, sucking on a sugar cube through a cloth just to taste the sweetness. She smiled at you, red-eyed and blissful. You tried not to look at the sores in her mouth. There's no stopping it. Sugar is the new king, and your job has become glorified damage control. You're not preserving smiles, you're mopping up after dessert. And every night, you sit down with your own dinner, plain bread, a cup of broth, and wonder what your teeth would look like if you had their money. Or worse, their sweet tooth. It's a rainy morning, and your first patient of the day is a widow wearing a thick black veil. She speaks softly, almost shyly, but you catch her drift. She wants dentures, full ones, top and bottom. Her gums are bare, her pride is bruised, and she's willing to pay well. You nod, reach for your notepad, and ask the usual question. Do you want real teeth, or the other kind? She hesitates, and you know exactly why. Because in the 19th century, if you're buying dentures, there's a good chance they came from the dead. The demand for full sets has exploded. People want to smile again, or at least appear as though they can. Vanity, courtship, or social climbing, whatever the reason, a set of teeth is no longer just a medical solution. It's a fashion accessory. You offer options: carved ivory, expensive and stains easily; porcelain, fragile and clicks when you talk; or real human teeth. You try not to say the word corpse. It tends to ruin the sale. Historians still debate the true extent of Waterloo teeth in the 19th century denture trade, but it's well documented that many sets were taken directly from dead soldiers, collected in bulk after battles and sold to dentists across Europe. The quality was unmatched. Young, healthy men, rarely diseased, their teeth barely used. Of course, not all teeth were from battlefields. Some came from unclaimed corpses in poorhouses, others from graveyards or executions. You've heard rumors of prisoners selling their own teeth to buy food. One man allegedly sold 8 before realizing he couldn't chew anymore. You've purchased them before, bags of teeth, sorted by type and vaguely cleaned. You bleach them in vinegar, boil them in brine, and polish them with chalk. You try not to picture where they came from, or who. Then comes the mounting. You use a base, usually ivory, sometimes hardened rubber, if you can get it. You drill small holes and wire the teeth in place. It's a delicate job. Too tight and the wires snap. Too loose and the teeth fall out mid-meal. A baron once lost his molar into a bowl of goose stew. He didn't laugh. You did. Getting the fit right is another ordeal. There are no dental impressions yet. No molds. You guess. You adjust. You jam the dentures into the patient's mouth and ask them to bite down. If they gag, you trim. If they bleed, you trim more. You keep at it until it stops looking like torture and starts resembling a smile. Sort of. The dentures are uncomfortable, of course. They slip. They squeak. Some stain instantly, turning a dull orange after 1 cup of tea. Others chip when biting into bread crust. You warn your patients not to eat anything tougher than mashed potatoes. Some listen, others come back with cracked jaws and tears in their eyes. But for every miserable case, there's one who beams with pride. A shopkeeper who can finally greet customers with a full smile. A retired sailor who no longer spits when he talks. A widow who wears her new teeth like pearls. Silent proof that she's still part of society. The price? Often months of wages. A year, even. But they pay. They save. Because no one wants to be known as toothless. No one wants to mumble through their final decades, gumming bread and sipping broth. And you? You just try to forget where those perfect bicuspids came from. You tell yourself it's recycling. You tell yourself it's dignity restored. You tell yourself the dead don't need their teeth anymore. But sometimes in the quiet hours, you wonder if the dead would agree. You've just finished your 3rd extraction of the day when your back gives out. Not fully, just enough to make you mutter something very unprofessional. You lean against the counter, sweat dripping into your collar, and glance at the chair. It's crooked, the footrest is cracked, the armrests are sticky with something red you hope is wine. This, right here, is your enemy. Not the cavities, not the screaming, the dental chair, or rather, the miserable excuse, for one. Because reclining dental chairs, padded headrests, adjustable height, forget it. You're working with a glorified kitchen stool. And your patients aren't leaning back. They're clutching the sides, bracing their feet, and praying they don't fall off mid-procedure. Some dentists improvise. You've seen barbers wedge people into barber chairs, heads tipped awkwardly backward, feet dangling. Others pile cushions or books under the patient to get a better angle. One man even strapped his patients into a wooden box with armholes. Effective? Maybe. Comforting? Not exactly. Historians still argue whether early dental chairs were purposefully crude, designed to restrain movement, or simply the best they could manage with what they had. Either way, sitting in one was closer to being tied to a cartwheel than relaxing in a modern clinic. And don't even think about adjustable lighting. You're using sunlight, maybe a candle. If it's late in the day, you angle a mirror to catch what's left of the dusk. You've performed extractions by lamplight, shadow dancing across your patient's face while you squint into a gaping mouth, trying to decide whether that's a molar or a small, angry stone. Your neck aches, your shoulders are knots, your patience wears thin. But the real tragedy is how your patients suffer. The poor souls get zero comfort, no arm support, no recline. They're forced to sit bolt upright while you jam tools into their mouth. Some tilt their heads back so far that you can hear their vertebrae protest. Others keep slumping forward, trying to escape. Children? They wriggle. Constantly. You once had to kneel on the floor and hold a boy's head between your knees just to remove a canine. His mother fainted, and sometimes restraint becomes necessity. You've tied people to chairs before, not in cruelty, but desperation. When someone is halfway through a procedure and starts flailing, you grab the rope. Leather belts, curtain ties, torn bed sheets, whatever keeps the jaw still long enough to finish. One patient slapped you mid-extraction. Another bit clean through your glove. A farmer kicked over your entire tray of tools, sending a set of pliers flying into the wall like a harpoon. You try to improvise. You pad the seat with folded coats. You stick a cushion behind the neck. You experiment with different stool heights, but all it does is remind you how badly this setup fails. And yet, there are whispers of better chairs. In cities like Paris and Philadelphia, some dentists have started importing actual dental chairs with reclining backs and adjustable headpieces. They say it changes everything. Easier access, less neck strain, fewer mid-procedure collapses. You dream of owning one. You've sketched designs on the back of old receipts. Hinges, levers, upholstery, even a small drawer beneath the seat for your duller tools. You imagine what it'd be like, not just for you, but for the people who come here in fear. Because the real pain of dentistry sometimes isn't the tooth. It's the humiliation, sitting exposed, head tilted, mouth open and nowhere to run. That awful chair makes them feel powerless, like livestock waiting for the hammer. You want to change that. One day, when you've saved enough, when the landlord forgets to collect, when the chickens finally start laying again. Until then, you wipe the armrest, tighten the screws on the backrest, and hope it holds through the next appointment. Because nothing screams "trust me" like a patient falling out of the chair mid-scream. The man sitting across from you has a twinkle in his eye and a suitcase full of lies. He's wearing polished boots, a wide grin, and a badge that says "Doctor," even though you're fairly certain he's never touched a textbook in his life. He opens the case. Inside, vials, bottles, jars, labels like tooth elixir, molar miracle, and instant enamel restorer. You pick up one. It smells like turpentine and peppermint. You glance at him. He winks. Welcome to the golden age of snake oil. If you think you're underqualified, meet your competitors. Traveling salesmen, self-proclaimed doctors, and miracle healers peddling all sorts of concoctions to people desperate for dental relief. Tooth pain, after all, doesn't discriminate. And in a world with no regulation, hope sells faster than truth. Historians still argue how much of 19th century dental medicine was genuine experimentation versus outright grift. But you've seen enough to know, most of it is nonsense. You've tried some of these elixirs. Nerve tonic made your assistant hallucinate bees. Calcium wash turned teeth green. One jar claimed to regrow lost teeth in 5 days. It was mostly vinegar and egg yolk. You poured it on a cracked molar. It foamed, then it caught fire. That patient moved away. But the public loves these cures. They're cheaper than real dental care. They don't involve screaming, and they come in pretty glass bottles with gold lettering. Some even glow in the dark, thanks to trace amounts of uranium. Safe? No. Spectacular? Definitely. You've tried warning people, you've posted flyers. Don't trust street remedies. But the damage is done. A girl comes in with gums like raw meat. I used a strengthening powder, she whispers. It was powdered alum and crushed seashells. You pull 3 teeth before lunch. You start making your own remedies. Nothing dangerous, just clove oil mixed with mint and vinegar. You bottle it, call it comfort drops, and sell it for a few coins. It won't fix anything, but it numbs the ache long enough for people to sleep. You feel guilty. Then you remember what else is out there. Some of the most popular tonics contain cocaine. Real, uncut, unmeasured cocaine, used in teething syrups for babies. Your own cousin gave it to his daughter. She slept for 2 days, woke up smiling, then stopped sleeping altogether. Laudanum is everywhere too. A few drops on the gum and the pain vanishes. So does the memory of your own name if you take too much. You know more than one patient who became addicted. One man started pulling out his own teeth, slowly, deliberately, just to feel the laudanum work. And then there are the tooth embrocations, herbal pastes with vague instructions. Apply thrice daily. Avoid moonlight. One had belladonna in it. You saw what it did to someone's eyes. Pupils wide as saucers, staring at nothing, whispering about spiders in their teeth. Sometimes you want to scream, not because of the pain or the poverty, but because people would rather trust a shiny label than your hands. And who can blame them? You're tired. Your tools are dull. Your office smells like boiled rags. Meanwhile, the man with the suitcase has a horse, a slogan, and a clean shirt. You tried to get one of them arrested once. The constable laughed. Tooth powder's not a crime, he said. Then he bought a bottle. So you adapt. Again, you offer advice. You learn basic chemistry. You test every new miracle on a chipped tooth nailed to a board before letting it near a human. You start carrying your own remedy kit, not to compete, but to protect. Because while you may not have a fancy label or a silk vest, you have something better: experience, and teeth that haven't been dissolved by glowing paste. You've seen some horrifying things in your time: jawbone infections that ooze like week-old stew, gums so swollen they look like bruised fruit. But if you had to pick the one thing that makes your stomach churn the most, the smell. Your office is an assault on the nose, a pungent symphony of spit, rot, tobacco, and blood. It clings to your coat. It follows you home. You've tried burning herbs. You've sprinkled vinegar on the floor. Nothing works. The stink is part of the job. It starts the moment a patient walks in. They breathe. You flinch. You try not to react, but the stench wafts across the room and settles like a fog. Bad breath? That's putting it kindly. It's more like breath soaked in graveyard. You do what you can. A tin basin for rinsing, a cup of salt water, a polite suggestion to swish before the procedure. But most people either don't bother or spit into the nearest corner. Some chew tobacco to cleanse their mouths, others stuff cloves between their teeth. One man swore by rinsing with beer. Another brought his own cleansing stone, which turned out to be just a lump of soap. You try to stay professional, but when someone opens their mouth and it smells like something died, you instinctively lean back. Once, you coughed so hard mid-procedure that your forceps slipped and the patient bit your thumb. You both screamed. And it's not just breath, it's the spittoons. You've got 3 of them, one at the chair, one by the door, and a backup by your workbench. They're heavy brass, easy to clean, in theory, and absolutely revolting. Blood, pus, bits of tooth, tobacco juice, the occasional half-chewed biscuit. It all ends up in there. You empty them daily. Sometimes, the sound they make when you pour them out? A sloshy metallic plop that could haunt a man for life. You've learned to hold your breath and look away. Historians still debate when hygienic standards began to rise in dental practices. But for now, you're firmly in the filth as furniture era. You wipe your tools on the same cloth you use to clean your hands. You rinse your fingers in a bowl that's technically older than your chair. You do your best. But the truth is, your office is less a clinic and more a scented grave. Even your coat smells, no matter how much you scrub it. The blood never truly comes out. And there's always a faint odor of iron and garlic hovering around you. Children wrinkle their noses when you walk past. Dogs bark. Your neighbor once accused you of boiling rodents. You didn't correct her. You've stopped noticing it mostly. But others haven't. One patient vomited as soon as he sat down. Another brought a lavender sachet to hold under his nose. A wealthy woman refused to enter unless you burned rose water in the fireplace for 30 minutes prior. You did. It didn't help. You once considered opening a window, but then the cold got in and your fingers froze to your tools, so you tried stuffing the cracks with cotton. Then the mice came. And all of this happens in a room the size of a pantry, low ceiling, peeling font, a single oil lamp flickering like it wants to quit. Still, you soldier on. You scrub the spittoons. You boil the tools when you can. You start chewing parsley between patients. Not for you, for them. To pretend, at least, that someone in the room believes in cleanliness. Because when your work involves drilling, yanking, and stuffing strange powders into infected jaws, the least you can do is make it smell a little less like death. The woman on your table is silent. Not from fear, she's done this before. Not from pain, though there'll be plenty of that. No, she's silent because she knows that in this moment, her dignity is the cost of your service. And it's worse because she's a woman. Being a 19th century dentist is hard, but being a female dental patient in the 19th century, that's a whole different hellscape. Everything about the profession was designed by, for, and around men. The chairs, the tools, the social rules. The entire experience is built on discomfort for anyone who doesn't meet the ideal male patient standard. Stoic, broad-jawed, and conveniently less judged for how they look afterward. Women, on the other hand, were expected to have perfect teeth, pearly, straight, dainty. A beautiful smile was part of a woman's charm, her currency in the brutal game of marriage and social status. But no one wanted to talk about how those teeth got fixed, or pulled, or replaced. That's where you come in. She sits before you now, lace gloves folded on her lap, bonnet tilted just so, and you're about to stick a rusty metal tool halfway down her throat. The shame is palpable. Historians still argue whether the rise in discreet dental treatments for women was a product of modesty or societal cruelty. You lean toward cruelty. Women were expected to be clean, composed, silent, and meanwhile, you're cranking their jaws open with tools that look like medieval instruments of war. She flinches as you ask her to tilt her head back. You see the hesitation, the fear not of pain, but of being seen this way. Mouth wide open, drooling, grunting through a gag reflex. It's humiliating, not just physically, but socially. Some refuse to open wide. Others apologize before every sound, every twitch. One woman once whispered, "Forgive me," before you even touched her molar. And don't forget the rules. No screaming, no wincing, no spitting. You've had male patients wail like infants, but if a woman so much as yelps, she's seen as fragile, dramatic, unladylike, so they endure it, quietly. You try to be gentle, but you're working in a system that doesn't allow for true gentleness. The tools don't bend, the chairs don't support, and you're only one pair of hands trying to fix something that society keeps punishing. And if she needs dentures, that's its own scandal. A woman with false teeth is often judged more harshly than a man missing half his jaw. She may ask you to make them invisible, to match her gum color, to never ever tell a soul. One client once insisted her dentures be delivered in a sewing basket, hidden beneath embroidery floss. You obliged. You've seen a lady faint from the mere suggestion of extraction. Not from the pain, she hadn't even sat down yet, but from the shame of needing it. Even the aftermath is harder. Women are expected to return to life immediately, smiling, chatting, eating politely, while nursing a mouthful of stitches and a cheek swollen like a grapefruit. One woman came in with abscessed gums, untreated for weeks. Why? She said she didn't want to bother anyone, especially not a male dentist. You felt sick for days, and what could she do? There were no women dentists, not officially, not in most places. A few rare trailblazers were beginning to emerge, one in New England, another in France, but they were anomalies, whispers, threats to the structure. So for now, it's just you, trying to hold the line between compassion and efficiency, between comfort and the cold iron truth of your trade. You see her wince, her hands tighten on the lace, and you pause, just for a moment, to give her space. Because in this room, in this chair, in this brutal profession, no one else ever does. It's another foggy evening when a boy, no more than 9, is dragged through your door by a frantic mother. He's whimpering, clutching his cheek, and mumbling something you can't quite make out. You kneel, gently open his mouth, and there it is, a blackened molar, cracked, oozing, twitching. Wait, twitching? You blink, look closer, and yes, there it is again, a subtle, slimy wriggle deep in the cavity. You step back. You've seen this before. The toothworms. To modern ears, it sounds ridiculous, but in the 19th century, it was a very real belief that toothaches were caused by tiny worms burrowing inside the tooth, wriggling and gnawing, feeding on the sweet rot and causing unspeakable pain. People believed these worms came from decaying food, or were born from a body out of balance. Some thought they crawled in from outside, squirming through the gums at night. No one could agree, but everyone agreed they were real. Historians still argue whether these worms were actually misidentified pulp tissue, nerve strands, or the maggots of an actual fly infestation. But in practice, you couldn't convince most patients otherwise, so you treat them. How do you kill a worm hiding inside a tooth? Simple. You smoke it out. You've seen all the methods. A pipe packed with crushed henbane and sulfur, a funnel fitted over the tooth, pumping an acrid smoke while the patient screams. If the worm wriggles out, the treatment worked, they say. If not, burn more. You've tried it, once. The patient passed out from the fumes. No worm emerged. You buried the funnel in the backyard and promised yourself never again. Still, people ask. One man insisted you use hot oil. Boiling oil, just a drop. You warned him, he begged, you dripped it in. He lost the tooth and half the surrounding gum. He thanked you anyway. Some concoctions are even worse. You've heard of patients rinsing with turpentine, stuffing garlic paste into cavities. One merchant ground up live beetles, claimed it scared the worms off. His teeth turned blue. You told him it was progress. He believed you. Then there's the worm charms, little amulets worn around the neck, said to lull the worms to sleep. One boy's mother swore by hers her son died of sepsis 2 weeks later. You've tried to explain the truth, that the pain comes from decay, from nerves, from infection. But when people are desperate, science doesn't stand a chance against folklore. So now you choose your battles. Sometimes you play along. You tell them you've neutralized the worm. You let them spit into a cloth and point at the stringy pulp, whispering, "There it is, gone now." They leave relieved. You get paid, and no one sets anything on fire. But it wears on you, because beneath the soot and myth is real suffering. People clutching their faces, trembling through sleepless nights, convinced that something alive is eating them from the inside. And you, standing there with a rusted hook and a spoonful of clove oil, trying to be a scientist in a world ruled by shadow. One night, you dream about the worms, giant ones coiling through molars like tunnels. You wake up with a sore jaw and a fear you can't name. You check your own teeth the next morning, just in case. It's market day. Crowds fill the square. You're on your way to buy more vinegar, your cleaning solution of choice, when you hear it. A cheer, then another. Curious, you edge through the crowd. At the center, under a canvas awning, a man in a crimson vest is standing beside a chair. Not a merchant, not a priest, a dentist. Well, sort of. He raises a glinting pair of forceps to the sky, flashing a theatrical grin. Beside him, a middle-aged woman braces herself. The crowd leans in. A drummer starts beating a slow rhythm, and then, with a dramatic flourish, he yanks. The woman screams, the crowd roars, the drummer hits a crescendo, and just like that, a bloodied tooth is held aloft like a trophy, tooth pulling as public entertainment. Welcome to your competition. It sounds absurd now, but in the 19th century, dentistry wasn't always tucked away behind closed doors. Sometimes it was performance art. Traveling tooth pullers set up shop in busy squares, pulling teeth in front of spectators to draw attention, prove their skill, or just make a quick buck. Historians still debate whether these public extractions were more about medicine or money, but for the showman, it didn't matter. Pain was part of the drama, and the audience loved it. They laughed, they winced, they heckled. One man fainted mid-performance. Another demanded a refund because his pain wasn't dramatic enough. You once heard of a dentist who brought a trained parrot that screeched, pull it," during procedures. You can't compete with that. Back in your little office, patients weep quietly and beg for numbness. Out here, people cheer for blood. It's part medicine, part a theater, part horror show. Some dentists even dressed in costume, plague masks, surgical aprons, powdered wigs to draw a crowd. You watch as the crimson-vested man tosses the extracted tooth into a bucket. The drummer pounds a celebratory beat. Coins fly toward the stage. A child claps wildly. The patient, mouth stuffed with rags, stumbles away like a hero. And you wonder how many people actually feel better after this. How many end up in a real chair weeks later with infections, shattered roots, and mouths too mangled to fix. Because after the curtain falls, you're the one they come to, the sober follow-up act, the janitor of someone else's drama. You've had patients show up with sockets packed with candle wax, a trick suggested by street dentists to seal in the healing. You've seen mouths cauterize with hot metal rods. You've treated a boy whose front tooth was yanked out with a rope tied to a horse cart. Yes, a horse cart, but it's hard to blame them. These public pullers are loud, confident, and cheap. You're tucked in a back alley with creaky floors and a kettle of questionable tea. No music, no parrot, just a steady hand and a lot of vinegar. You've thought about setting up outside, maybe offering spectator discounts. But the idea dies the moment you picture someone bleeding out mid-market. That's not dentistry, that's tragedy. So you go home, you scrub your forceps, you light a candle, you wait. Because real healing doesn't happen under a canvas tent with drums in the background. It happens quietly, carefully, one molar at a time. You're halfway through packing an abscessed molar with cloves when your patient slumps forward, snoring softly. Not passed out, just asleep. The whiskey you gave him must have hit hard, which is ironic considering he's the 5th drunk you've seen today. And it's only noon. Being a 19th century dentist means dealing with all sorts of patients. The stoic, the fainting, the screaming. But the worst, by far, are the inebriated. Or worse, the self-medicated. They come in with glazed eyes and slurred speech, claiming they can take it. They reek of gin or rum or some homemade concoction brewed in a tin bucket behind their shed. Some bring their own numbing agent, usually just more alcohol. You've had to fish whiskey flasks out of coat pockets mid-procedure. And it's not just the patients. Sometimes it's you. You've done it. A nip before an extraction, a sip between appointments, just enough to steady your hand when it shakes, just enough to take the edge off the blood and screaming. You tell yourself it's fine, necessary even, but then you miss a root or slip with the file, and suddenly the line between numbness and negligence blurs. Historians still debate how widespread substance abuse was among 19th century medical workers, but the combination of pain, pressure, and trauma makes it understandable. You've seen more than teeth rot in this profession. You've seen people break. There's the man who tore out his own molar with a butter knife. The girl who begged you to remove every tooth in her head just so she could stop the dreams. You do what you can, but you're not a healer. You're a stopgap, a back alley medic with a blunt instrument and a tin of cloves. And it's not just alcohol. Laudanum is everywhere. A tincture of opium sold over the counter and spooned into teacups like honey. You once had a patient show up, cheeks flushed, giggling. "Can't feel a thing," she chirped. You believed her until she bit through your glove during a filling. Others use morphine, cocaine, even ether, though inhaling that can turn your lungs into soup. You heard about a dentist who passed out mid-procedure after huffing too much. His assistant had to finish the job. Poor guy fainted too. And the amateurs, they're the real danger. Anyone with a rusty tool and a strong stomach can claim to be a dentist. They set up in taverns, in barns. One man advertised tooth removal and piano tuning on the same sign. You've had to undo their mistakes, pulled half-yanked molars dangling by threads, treated cracked roots stuffed with candle wax and salt. You once found a fishhook jammed between 2 premolars, left there as a placeholder by a man who read about it in a magazine. And through it all, the line between professional and imposter keeps thinning. You try to rise above it. You clean your tools. You sharpen your files. You offer real care, even if your workspace smells like old soup and despair. But it's hard to hold the line when your patients are slurring their words and asking if you'll take payment in rum. You once had to reschedule a man 3 times because he was too drunk to keep his head upright. He returned a week later with half his jaw swollen and said, "Guess it's ripe now." You poured yourself a drink that night, but even through the haze, yours or theirs, you push forward. You steady your hands, you smile when they spit blood into your sleeve, because someone has to do it. Someone has to pretend they're sober, sane, and ready, even if everyone in the room is faking it. You're cleaning your tools by lamplight, half asleep, half numb, when a knock interrupts your thoughts. It's your neighbor, face pale, cradling a young girl in his arms. "She's screaming," he gasps. "She hasn't stopped in 3 days." You let them in. Her cheeks are flushed, her eyes glassy. You peer into her mouth, and there it is, another deep cavity, festering, probably near the nerve. Only this time, you've got something new. You reach for a small, corked bottle, ether. You don't fully trust it, but desperate mouths make desperate hands. This is the age of slow, cautious scientific progress in dentistry, and it's finally beginning to show. Historians still argue whether the real turning point was ether, nitrous oxide, or chloroform, but one thing is clear. The 1840s mark a quiet revolution. Pain, once considered inevitable, is starting to lose its grip, not disappear, but loosen, slightly. You soak a rag with the ether. The girl squirms, you explain gently. Her father holds her still. You press the rag over her mouth and wait. 10 seconds. 20. Her breathing slows. Her body goes limp. Her pain retreats, if only for a moment. You work fast, extract the tooth. The root is long and angry, but it comes, no screams, no struggle. When she wakes, she's woozy but smiling. You sit back, hands trembling. It worked. It actually worked. This could change everything. And it's not just anesthesia. Other innovations are starting to trickle in. You've heard of a new tool, a foot-powered drill that spins faster than your files ever could. It's clunky, loud, terrifying, but it bores through enamel like magic. You've seen a sketch. You want one. There's talk of rubber-based dentures, softer and more affordable than ivory, and new types of fillings, less toxic, easier to mold, and just maybe not filled with mercury. A colleague in the city claims he's testing something called gutta-percha. You pretend you know what that is. And X-rays, someone mentioned rays that see through skin. Sounds absurd, but so did sleeping through a tooth extraction. Of course, progress moves like molasses. Most of what's new is experimental, expensive, or dangerous. Ether can explode, chloroform can stop a heart, and nitrous oxide, laughing gas, is more of a party trick than a surgical solution. But it's something. You try to stay informed, you borrow journals, visit city practices, attend a traveling medical lecture where a man pulls out a dead squirrel to explain gum disease. You leave early, but you admire the ambition. The profession is slowly shifting from backrooms and market stalls to something resembling science. Schools are opening, dental societies are forming. For the first time, you hear the word standards. You don't know whether to be excited or terrified, because progress means change, and change means someone might finally look at your blood-stained apron and say, "That's not good enough." Someday, patients might expect clean tools, reclining chairs, pain-free procedures. Someday, they'll look back at what you're doing now and shudder. But for now, you press forward. You scrape the dried blood off your forceps and light another lamp. You read about ether, about pulpectomies, about surgical sutures that dissolve inside the mouth. You take notes, you dream, because maybe, just maybe, you won't always be a butcher with a bottle. Maybe soon you'll be something better. You're up late again, hunched over a cracked ledger and a cooling cup of tea. The lamp flickers. Your back aches. You stare at the numbers. Payments in flour, in chickens, in silence. And then your eyes drift to the pamphlet beside it. A simple title. The American Journal of Dental Science. You never thought it would come to this. For most of your life, dentistry has been chaos. Loud, bloody, makeshift, but now here it is in print. Organized, structured, professional. There are diagrams of teeth, articles on anatomy, letters between doctors debating molar angles and nerve extractions. It's heady stuff. You run your fingers over the paper. It smells like ink and ambition. This is what they're calling the birth of dentistry, though you've been yanking teeth for decades. Still, you admit, it does feel like something new is stirring. For the first time, people are talking about schools. Real ones. The Baltimore College of Dental Surgery just opened. 1840, the first of its kind. Actual classrooms, courses, professors who've never once held a blood-stained spittoon. It's both inspiring and infuriating. You want to cheer and also throw the pamphlet into the fire, because if dentistry is now becoming a profession, what does that make you? Historians still debate whether old-school practitioners were pushed out or folded into the new era. But either way, your kind, the improvisers, the barbers, the battlefield veterans, are fading, replaced by men in white coats with Latin words and smooth hands. You've even seen one, young, polished, fresh from school. He had a portable case of gleaming tools and handed out calling cards that said surgeon dentist. He treated a mayor's son. Word spread. Now he has a line down the block. He's good, too good. He never needed to bite down on a stick while pulling a molar from a howling farmer. You watch as he opens a clean little office across the street. Curtains, wallpaper, an actual chair that tilts. And yet, something's missing. That grit, that history, that dark knowledge earned in sweat and shrieks. He may know every nerve in the mouth, but you've seen every kind of pain behind the eyes. So you decide, you'll evolve, too. You start saving for better tools. You make notes about rubber bases and ether drops. You clean your office. You boil your forceps longer. You even draft a sign. Gentle dental services, now with comfort remedies. You try not to laugh at yourself, but deep down, you know this. Change is here, and not all of it's bad. There's dignity in learning, in safety, in moving beyond blood and bartering. And if that means letting go of old methods, so be it. You'll still carry your past, in your scars, in the shake of your left hand, in the faint scent of vinegar and iron on your sleeves. But maybe, just maybe, you'll also carry the future. Not because a college gave you a certificate, but because you never stopped trying to be better. It's a quiet afternoon when a familiar face shuffles in, a man you treated years ago. You'd pulled 4 teeth, packed an abscess, stitched a split gum. He'd screamed so loud the neighbors complained. Today, he smiles, full set of dentures, gleaming, perfectly fitted. Got him from the city, he says, didn't feel a thing. You nod, forcing a smile of your own. You knew it would come to this because no matter how hard you worked, how many molars you yanked, or abscesses you drained, the future arrived anyway. Padded chairs, anesthetics, professional clinics with glass windows and porcelain sinks. Dentistry is no longer your dark, smelly, makeshift corner of pain. It's clean, clinical, calming, and for someone like you, that's both a blessing and a funeral. You look around your office, your worn chair, your faded sign, the row of tools with notches from years of sharpening. Each one tells a story, each one a scar, and yet, outside, people walk past now without a second glance. They go to the new dentist, the one with a white coat and a receptionist. You're not angry, not really. You're just tired. You've survived the worst of it. Worms, whiskey, public extractions. You've pulled teeth during storms and plagues, worked through screams and sobbing, learned medicine one bleeding jaw at a time. You kept people alive when no one else would touch their mouths. You mattered. But now, you're becoming a ghost, a relic, a story told by young dentists who chuckle and shake their heads. Historians still argue whether modern dentistry owes more to the scientists or the butchers. But you know the truth. Without the pain, the mess, the long nights, and boiling tools, there wouldn't be a profession at all. The worst part? Even now, even with all the tools, the training, the technology, people are still afraid of the dentist. They still tense up in the chair. They still flinch at the sound of a drill. They still lie awake the night before, imagining the worst. Because the ghost of 19th century dentistry lingers. It's in every whispered, this won't hurt. In every needle, every latex glove, every clean tray of sterile instruments. A reminder that once, not so long ago, relief came with a scream in a bucket. You stand in the doorway of your little office, watching the world pass by. A boy walks past eating candy. A woman with a bright smile laughs without shame. Somewhere, a drill hums softly behind a window. You smile. One last time. Because for all its horror, all its grime, all its gut-wrenching agony, you helped people. And they'll never know how bad it used to be. But now you do. So now, as the story fades and the lamp grows dim, you breathe slower. Let the sounds drift away, the clink of forceps, the creak of a wooden chair, the low moan of pain in the shadows, gone now, replaced by silence, by softness, by sleep. Imagine the tools laid to rest. No more screams, no more midnight extractions or bloody aprons, just stillness. The ghosts of old teeth pulled and packed away, the old chair empty, the air clean for the first time. You've walked through the worst of it, through smoke-filled rooms, through stench and superstition, through the evolution of pain into practice. And you're still here, so let yourself drift now, away from the clamor of the past, away from the grime and the guilt, towards something gentler. Maybe you're in a field now, or a quiet old house, candle flickering beside a tidy little bed. The world is far off, the pain is far off, just you, your breath, a calm night, and a body that finally knows rest. Let your jaw unclench, let your shoulders drop, let it all go. You've heard the worst of it. Now you get to sleep. Thanks for being here, really.